I'm Mike, and this is my wife, Michelle, and we have been married for almost 18 years, 18 wonderful years.
We have a son named Michael, who's almost 10, a son named Mark, who's 7, a son named Nathan, who would be 6 this summer, and a daughter, Gracie, who's 4.
We met in college near the end of our college career, our senior year, and we got married after her first year of medical school. And we've been married almost 18, it'll be 18 years this month, and they have just been incredible years. Kind of have the pre-kids years where there was a lot of fun and freedom and things that we did. Trips to Hawaii, vacations and that sort of thing, but I think the highlight of our marriage was certainly when our first child was born, and then each subsequent child. It's just amazing to see yourself and your wife in your arms in front of you after birth. So the birth of our first child was probably the most amazing moment in time in our marriage.
So when we found out about our third pregnancy, we already had 2 boys. Michael was 3 and Marky was 10 months, and I remember being a bit surprised that we were going to have babies that close in time, and just thought, okay, we're going to do this. So we were very quickly very excited that we were going to have a third kid.
And I remember thinking it was no big deal that they were close to each other, and we were just totally excited and ready to have another one. It was a great moment every time that we learned we were going to have a baby. There was lots of enthusiasm and joy and anticipation.
I was 16 weeks pregnant, and because of my maternal age, decided to do the blood screening that typically screens for Down syndrome, just so we would kind of have some idea if there were any issues going on with the pregnancy. And a week later, when I was at work, my OB called me, told me that there was a problem with the blood tests and not to worry. Typically there's a lot of false positives. She was scheduling us in for a detailed ultrasound, and we had decided ahead of time that if the ultrasound looked abnormal, that we would probably do an amniocentesis.
We felt like it was important to know what the baby had. We just had a sense that we needed to know what the condition was, if there was something wrong with the baby.
Mm-hmm. Before we went in for the ultrasound, we actually met with a genetic counselor. She went through the different blood levels that they had found, and they were concerned that the baby may have trisomy 18, which is a problem with chromosome 18. So we had a little bit of that knowledge going into the ultrasound. So we went in for the ultrasound, and it was a very unique experience. The ultrasonographer was a physician who basically went through the facts and went from head to toe and told us our baby had brain problems and heart problems and kidney problems, and was very likely a chromosomal baby, is kind of how she put it. And so very quickly thereafter she said, do you want to do an amnio? And I think we had already decided ahead of time that was the plan, that we wanted to do that. She didn't really explain much, but she guessed that there was a chromosome abnormality of some kind. She just kind of said it somewhat flippantly, so it was a strange, somewhat impersonal experience. So we went ahead and had the amniocentesis, which was also a very unpleasant experience. And I remember leaving there. How long has it been? 6 years? Just heartbroken, devastated, weeping, as we are now.
It's one of those things where you hear about this sort of thing happening, but you never really think it's going to happen to you. And then all of a sudden, here it is. It's happening to us. We felt like, as a pastor and as a physician, we've both been there for other people who've had devastating diagnoses. It was just kind of a whammo for us, and it was really hard.
It was really hard. And I remember thinking, this can't be, this can't be happening to us. And is our baby going to be okay? And what are we going to do? And we just cried and cried. And, kind of began the grieving process of, we know we're not going to have a normal baby. And that's a hard realization, because kind of all your hopes are dashed, right then and there. But
we eventually learned that our baby Nathan had what's called triploidy. So it wasn't just one chromosome that had an issue. It was every one of his chromosomes.
All 23 chromosomes had 3. So like wasn't a trisomy 18 or trisomy 20 when it was called triploidy. It was basically 3 of every chromosome, which was an incredibly rare, bizarre chromosome abnormality. I also remember the genetic counselor called us as were the results of the amniocentesis and told me those results. And we had told her back when we first met her before the ultrasound and everything, she had talked about the options of keeping baby or terminating pregnancy. And we kind of looked at her like, we wouldn't consider terminating our pregnancy regardless of what the results were. And I distinctly remember when she called back with those results of the amniocentesis, and she said, your baby has triploidy. And she gave me the statistics, that the longest a child has ever survived with this outside the womb was 40 days, and most babies die in the second trimester. And her words were, doesn't this change your decision about terminating? And it was just I remember thinking, why is she asking me that question? Of course it doesn't change my decision about terminating. I remember distinctly telling her, I don't have that right to take the life of my baby, and I'm going to carry this baby, and if the baby is born alive, then we will deal with that, and if the baby dies in my womb, we'll deal with that as well. So,
as people of faith, for us it was not an option to, in the words they used and the lingo they used, to terminate. For us, it was that just wasn't an option. From our perspective, a human being does not have the right to end the life of another human being. So once we learned our baby had triploidy, we then, after we processed the shock of having a baby that was certainly going to die, barring some miraculous work that we weren't really expecting. So our mind shifted from once we got this news, then our mind shifted to one of two scenarios, because there were small percentages of babies that are born with triploidy and will live for a certain period of time. That was the rare exception, but that happens. And so we had to now prepare ourselves for going to the hospital and delivering a baby that would either be dead, or that we would be delivering a baby that would be alive, that we would bring home, that almost certainly would die very soon after it was in our home.
Well, and from that time on, 18 weeks, I started going in every week, kind of expecting that the baby was going to die at any point. That's what my OB kept saying. I continued to grow and felt him moving and kicking and everything that you would normally feel when you're pregnant. And then, one day I'd gone in and the heart was kind of slowing down a little bit. And then the next day, I know the day that he died inside of me, I was 37 and a half weeks. It was a very long delivery. I had had previous C-section, so they had to induce me, and the induction was very, very long. I was in the hospital in labor for 48 hours by the time I delivered him. It's a high-risk delivery if you have a baby who's died inside of you. That makes you at risk for infection, plus I'd had a C-section before, so that made me more at risk too. So they did things slowly, and it was very, very painful to be in there. I had wonderful care, wonderful nurses. So we delivered our baby and were able to spend several hours with him, and my sister and mom and my oldest son Michael was able to come and hold him, and we took pictures, and it was a sweet time right after he was born. And then I got really, really sick. I had to stay. I thought I was going to have the baby and get to leave the hospital, but I got to stay in the OB/GYN floor with babies crying all over the place for another couple of days. I was very, very sick after that. We got to spend our anniversary in the hospital.
As a pastor, we often are there shortly after a birth to comfort and pray with a mom or dad or both. And so it's a familiar process to go to the hospital and see that. As a pastor, it's also a familiar process to be with people that are struggling to have children and aren't able to. And so I'm with people a lot, praying for them, giving them counsel who are in those kinds of situations. And of course, it's not as common, but I've also been there when there's been problems, when there's been a child that comes out with birth defects or some kind of disorder, and have been there to comfort parents that are in shock. So I kind of been there to help others, but it's very different experiencing it yourself, and we were definitely in a place that neither of us had ever been.
I was going to say, as a pediatrician, part of my training is when I was in residency, where you basically live and breathe in a hospital. I was in a children's hospital in Dallas, and a huge portion of my training was the care of newborn children, both normal, healthy babies and babies who were born premature who have problems. And I worked in a hospital in Dallas that had one of the highest birth rates in the country. And one of my jobs as a resident was to be at deliveries of any kind of high-risk baby, whether there was a problem or whether the baby was premature. So I have been to literally hundreds of deliveries and grabbed babies that were sick, and some of them weren't, which was great, but some of them were really sick. And I had no children at the time, but I do have many recollections of being one of the first doctors to share either good or bad news with brand new parents, sometimes with their babies. Sometimes they couldn't even hold their babies because we'd whisk them off to the ICU. And so I've been on the doctor side of things, not counseling pregnant women, but bearing good and bad news to new parents. You know, I take care of children who have problems, who aren't normal. I take care of a lot of healthy kids too, but I have patients in my practice with Down syndrome and patients who have what we call neurodevastation, where they're globally delayed and don't eat on their own and don't think on their own and don't speak on their own. And so I guess I've been on the doctor side of that. So to be on the patient side, it's a very different experience. And I know whenever you're taking care of another doctor's kids, it's always a little bit kind of puts you on edge, because you want to make sure you do everything right and you feel like you're being looked at and kind of watched a little more closely. And then if you have another physician's kids who there's a problem, it's even that much more stressful. So, I don't know if that has any play in the way that I was taken care of when I was first, when we were first found out that our baby wasn't normal. I don't know, but that's just my perspective on that.
So one of the dynamics that we both had to deal with was the perspective that came across, not in a rude way, but there was an expectation that was subtly communicated to us by the OB, by virtually everyone, the genetic counselor, that we would terminate this pregnancy. And one of the reasons for that was that the pregnancy was going to put Michelle at risk. And again, I don't remember the details of exactly what would happen to her. What was going to put you at risk so much? The delivery? Mm-hmm. The delivery was going to potentially put, I guess, her life at risk, although I didn't really feel that in a sense. They did. And so the assumption was that we would certainly terminate this pregnancy. And the question from their angle was just when. And we just looked at this in a very different way, and it was a way that we felt like wasn't really even considered by the people that we talked to, and that is that as people of faith, we did not think we had the right to end this baby's life. And even though the overwhelming percentages were that the baby was going to die, that wasn't up to us to short circuit that process. And so it was a challenge at times at times they got through to us because it seemed like, oh, this would be the easiest way out, and we could just end a lot of this if we ended the baby's life, but we chose not to do that.
My own OB was clearly of a different mind than I was, but she was very sweet about it. But I always got the sense that she didn't totally get my perspective, but she had met other people like me. I would say that my pediatrician colleagues that I worked with, he came up to me and he just said, I don't know how you're doing that. I know what I would do if that were my baby. I would get rid of it quickly because I couldn't deal with what you're dealing with. And so it was kind of his way, I think, of consoling me, but it wasn't super helpful. I think, I mean, I just kind of got the sense, no one other than him spoke to me directly, but I think people kind of thought I was a little bit crazy and like, why would you put yourself through that suffering when you could end it?
For me, some of the most poignant memories and hardest times were the delivery. The delivery took like 2 days, and that was just totally unanticipated and out of the blue. We just were never expecting the delivery to be as long as it was.
Because he was really little.
Small baby. We'd had this very difficult pregnancy, and we just thought this is going to be a short delivery and we'll be out of there soon, but it turned out to be probably a 48-hour delivery. And so as I was by her side through those 2 days waiting for Nathan, our baby who had died in the womb, to come out, as nurses came in and out, as all the different hospital staff came in and out, there was, through body language, through facial expressions, there was this communication of, why is your wife going through this? And there was kind of a battle in my mind that was going on, that perhaps we should not have come this course because of the pain that she was going through. It was very, very intense. And yet that pain, although it was very real, turned out to be false. In the end, we're very glad that we had Nathan. And it's hard to put a finger on it or give some kind of concrete.
The pain wasn't false. The pain was real.
The pain was real. The pain was real. What I'm saying is, the feelings that we should have terminated this baby early were false feelings that I was feeling. That the feelings were real, but that was not a regret that we had. After Nathan was born, it was a very hard time, but it was a very sweet time, and there were some great memories. One of them was we knew and anticipated that Nathan was going to be disfigured, and we didn't know to what extent. And the obstetrician had prepared us for that, and so we kind of made a deal with him that he would look at Nathan first, and then kind of give us a description whether we would be able to really emotionally deal with looking at him. And he said, oh, you'll certainly be able to look at him. And so we were really happy with that news. And so one of the nurses wrapped Nathan all up, and even though he was dead, we both held him and loved him. And even our son Michael, how old was Michael at that time?
He was 4.
4 years old. Our son Michael was able to hold him. And that was probably one of the sweetest moments that we had.
Yeah, I was picturing him maybe coming out with one eye, or things very, very, and he really looked, I mean, his head was bigger, but his little body was perfect. He had 2 arms and 2 legs and 10 toes and fingers, and he was really sweet looking.
During the labor, there were times where I felt like perhaps I was a bad husband because my wife was in immense pain. And there were times where I thought, perhaps we should not have put her through this, and we should have terminated the pregnancy.
I also remember very distinctly as we were walking out of the clinic when we had first found out, we didn't know what he had, but we knew there was something seriously wrong with him. And I remember looking at him actually as we got in the car and said, it would be so easy to be pro-choice right now. It would be so easy to just end the pain and the suffering right now. I didn't stick with it super long, but even later on, as weeks and weeks went on, you do question, like, gosh, what are we doing here? Are we just crazy? What what do we do? And we know this is the right thing to do, but man, it's really, really hard.
For me, maybe it wasn't even, maybe second guessing is a better way to describe it, because I never doubted the truth that we did not have the freedom to take this life. But my wife's pain was so severe during her labor that combined with people walking in and out, there were times where I really struggled with the pain that she was in.
What was a driving force for us to carry this baby to term? It's our Christian faith. It's, looking in the Psalms, and it says a baby's knitted and formed while the baby's in the womb, and we fully believe that God is sovereign and doesn't make mistakes. And so there was a purpose for him to give us this baby that was deformed in the eyes of the world and was not able to take a breath on this earth. But, obviously we're years past. The pain lessens, but we do, I see some reason, I can see how God has worked in some ways. He's allowed me to counsel other women who've lost babies or had miscarriages. But I don't think I have the big scope of God's purposes. And I think some of that I will never totally know why he asked us, both of us and me, to suffer in that intense kind of way. But I think the driving force is my faith in God, and that God is sovereign, and that God places every circumstance in your life for his purposes and ultimately for his glory.
The driving force for us in carrying Nathan to term, even though science told us that he was going to die, and that's indeed what happened, was because of our faith and because of the worldview that Scripture gives to us, and that is that God is the giver and the taker of life. In Job 1 it says that he gives and he takes away. And Job, who lost all of his children, said, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." And we, although we don't understand why, for Job or for us, we were to endure this, we believe that that's what God had for us. And God doesn't work like a mathematical equation, so I don't look back and say, okay, here's why we suffered, and here was the greater good that came out of it. It doesn't really work that way. We suffered, and God worked in our lives through that. But it came down to simply obeying the truths of Scripture, and that is that we as individuals don't have the right to take a human life, even one that's science tells us is going to end on its own. It's just not our prerogative, not our right to do that. And so, although there were times where I felt really struggled for the pain that my wife was in, especially during her delivery, we really never flexed in our own minds on that we were going to carry this baby to term, and perhaps he would live for some time, because some babies with triploidy did. During Michelle's pregnancy and her labor and the death of our son Nathan, there was a lot of suffering. And as a Christian, sometimes we might want to think, okay, if there's going to be this much suffering, then at some point in the future there's going to be a day or a time where there's going to be an aha moment where I'm going to get it, and I'm going to see, okay, this is why precisely I had to suffer, and some great thing is going to happen that's going to outweigh all of that suffering. And I don't think that's the way that it works at all, although we'd like for it to be that way. I think the way that it works is that suffering, like God, is a mysterious thing. And suffering is something the Bible tells us produces perseverance and character and hope. And without suffering, we don't develop perseverance and character in the way that we do with suffering. And so looking back on what was really hard and really painful and full of suffering, we don't have like a mathematical equation about how that pans out, but we know that that was God's plan for us, and that was the place for us to grow and to trust Him and to serve Him and to obey Him. And so that was part of the driving force of how we were living out our faith during a really hard time. One of the reasons that we did not abort our son Nathan was because human life is valuable and is precious. And we couldn't live with the idea of killing or terminating, to use their lingo, our baby, knowing that there's the slightest chance that he could live. And we believed that although it was an extraordinarily remote possibility, that was a possibility. And we didn't want to ever look back on our life or live with the what if, should we have not done this. So we, even through the pain and the suffering that we endured, know that absolutely, without a doubt, we did what was right, even though it was difficult and challenging and painful. But to deliver Nathan and to have him was the right thing to do.
If I had to say, is there any kind of redemptive purpose in what we chose to do with allowing, with me carrying Nathan to term? And I would have to say, with my faith, absolutely there was. There's no question about it. But I would say without Christ, there probably was not. I mean, He's the one that gives me meaning and purpose, and He's the one that gives the meaning to life. And so I knew it was the right thing to do. And so there wasn't really any other choice. Although my heart was, I want this to be done and over with. But from a human perspective, I wanted it to be done. I wanted the suffering to be done. But with knowing I was living for Christ, that was a choice I had to make. And so I guess I would say without Christ, there was no redemption in what I did. But with Him, He made everything make total sense. In me making the decision that we did, it still didn't change the pain and the degree of suffering, but it made things make sense.
Nathan, the pregnancy and delivery of Nathan was incredibly inconvenient for our lives. Looking back on it, we would do everything the same. We would make the same decision to keep him, and we know that we did the right thing.
Yes, it was very inconvenient. Months and months and months of inconvenience. But we wouldn't have changed what we did for anything.
Initially, after he was born, Michelle was not inclined at all to have any more children, and I was okay with that, although I was ready and wanting to have more. But it didn't take long where the pain decreased significantly, and we were able to have another child, and we named her Grace, and that was a very sweet birth to have after Nathan.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it has shaped our lives.
Oh, it definitely has shaped our
lives.
lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just have to kind of say how it shaped our lives.
And the main way it's shaped my life is it's increased manyfold my views of pro-life. We're rolling here.
The inconvenience of Nathan shaped my life for, really forever. It was a huge time frame of being pregnant, and a huge time frame of grieving. I was grieving the loss of my child for almost my entire pregnancy and beyond. It gives you more empathy towards those who are also suffering, whether in this same situation or something else. I think you're a little bit more compassionate. In my practice, I had experienced parents who had lost children before, and now I have a new bond with several moms. Very soon, maybe a month after I came back to work, after Nathan had died, I had a mom lose her baby the day before the baby was due, and we have a very special bond there every time I see her now. I mean, we hug each other, and we know we both have lost kids, so it does change you, forever. I think ultimately, just it makes you a more empathetic individual to those around you. And you can see, I have patients in my practice. It's all kind of getting back to work, but same within our church as well. But people who are hurting, and you're more kind to ask, or more thoughtful to ask, how are you doing? Are you sleeping? Are you how can I help you in any way? Can I provide meals? Can I do something like that for you?
As a pastor, I became just even much more bold and much more conscientious and active in defending those who don't have a voice. And I think the greatest evil that is going on in America today is the killing of babies in the womb. And when you lose a baby that you wanted to have, and wanted, have all of the memories that we have with our children that are living, God used that in my life to just make me that much more passionate to be a voice for those who don't have a voice. That's the biggest way I changed after this. I was already on that journey, and this just accelerated it a ton. I think it's wrong to say that convenience equates with happiness. It certainly would have been convenient and would have ended suffering and pain for a time in our lives. I think in the long run, had we aborted our baby Nathan, the pain actually would have been very different. It would have come much later, but it would have been very real, and there would have been a lot of regret. And so I think convenience is often a false pathway to happiness.
Our culture is so much into instant gratification, whether it's fast food or different addictions, or just the instant kind of happiness, and sometimes true happiness, you kind of have to work for it. Yeah, I think happiness ultimately, I think about me becoming a doctor, and had I been a doctor after just going to high school, I don't think I would have the same contentment as all the incredible hard work I had to go through with college and medical school and residency, and then being a doctor. Part of that is you have knowledge, but part of that is you worked really hard. You can go to a convenience store and you can get a hamburger that's been sitting there that's really fast, and you don't have to wait for it, but you could also go to like Claim Jumper and wait a really long time and get a great steak, and it's taken a lot more time, and it's worth it.
Even in the midst of the suffering and the pain, even when we were uncertain as to when or how this was going to play out, there was a sense of peace. I know it was harder for you because you had this baby inside of you that was going to die, but for me, I knew that it was the right thing to do, and I knew that it was going to be okay, and in fact it was going to be good even before he died.
I know that I had joy in the midst of it. I can say now that I do, be on the other side of it. And I just think I have greater depth of my character and of who I am because of what I've been through.
One of the things that was really surprising to me and delightful was seeing like half of Michelle's office show up at our memorial service for Nathan, for a baby that no one had any interaction with or talked to, who died just before coming out of the womb. And we had all kinds of people from all kinds of different worldviews and faith and non-faith perspectives and pro-choice perspectives. All kinds of people came and wept with us and heard our perspective and our journey that involved suffering and involved pain, but also involved hope and redemption and the grace of God. And His grace and peace was very real and tangible to us throughout the process, but throughout the pregnancy, but especially at the memorial service. It was a very sweet time, and it was a great encouragement to me to see all kinds of different people there.
I think our pro-life community, our church body and friends were incredibly supportive and continue to be, and I think it gives us a little bit more persuasiveness when we have pro-life, gatherings or things that are within our church, because we truly stand for what we say we stand for. We've lived it. It's not just talking about, oh, we should be pro-life when it's convenient, but we've lived through being pro-life when it's not convenient. So we've had a lot of support for that. Mike alluded to it at my memorial service. I was pleasantly surprised but downright shocked. I had many colleagues come and hug me and care for me, and mostly kind words. I do, not at a memorial service, but after I had the baby, I remember my OB who wasn't there saying something to me like about the OB that who delivered my baby. She said, "Oh, he's anti-termination like you are." She wasn't trying to be judgmental, but she was. I think ultimately she thought I was crazy for what I had done. But I think she respected the choices that we made. I have a fair number of teens in my practice, many who are sexually active, and quite a number of them who do get pregnant. And I don't want to say this, completely 100%, but the vast majority of the young ladies who choose to have an abortion, when I see them again, they've changed. They frequently become depressed. Their grades drop. I would say on average within a year they're on antidepressants. And perhaps that was because their lives were difficult before and they'd made poor choices. I don't really know, but I definitely have seen a trend in the last almost 13 years I've been practicing with my teenage patients who make that choice to end the life of their little baby.
What about, have you had the experience of working with young teen mothers who have decided to keep their babies?
I have, actually. I have a number of my teenagers who actually I just saw one this week, who bring their babies to see me. And it's interesting. Some of them have great support networks and some of them don't. They're all doing the best they can, and their babies, they're teen moms. It's a challenge, but I don't think any one of them would say, gosh, I wish I didn't have my baby. I've also had some of them ultimately have babies and then end up getting married later on, and it's pretty cool to see them raising their kids. It's definitely cool.
We've had teenagers in our church who were pregnant and who chose to keep their babies, and I wasn't involved in that decision. And although they knew and had heard pro-life preaching and teaching from the pulpit in previous years, I don't know to what degree that impacted their decision. Their thinking was, this is going to be a safe place, and my church family is going to embrace me and not kick me out. And so we dedicate the children of a teenage mom who's in high school, who has a baby. We do all that we can to support them. Of course, what they have done is sin. It is outside of God's plan, and marriage is the only place for babies to be made. And yet, when things go not according to God's plan, which often happens, we have to be there and show grace and forgiveness and mercy, and the church has to come alongside that. So we've had that experience several times in our congregation, and it's been a hard thing, but it's been a beautiful thing. I think every congregation has to be a safe place for women who are pregnant and who aren't married. As a pastor and in our churches, we need to support women who are pregnant and are not married. We need to not only do that in the church, but we need to do that in the community as well. And so I'm a big supporter of pregnancy centers or crisis pregnancy clinics, or whatever name they're going to go by, but places that are safe, that a teenager or a 40-year-old woman who is pregnant and not married and confused, that she has a safe place to go, and she's going to be able to get help and be encouraged and have someone help her financially, spiritually, emotionally, and even physically to get through what is a very difficult pregnancy.